The Tennessee Titans contract with wide receiver DeAndre Hopkins is full of potential incentives. I'll tell you how much extra money Hopkins can make, what he's got to do on the football field to make it, and why the Titans should be praying they get to pay it to him on today's edition of the Locked On Titans podcast. Let's get it.
You are Locked On Titans, your daily Tennessee Titans podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to the Locked On Titans podcast. I am your host, Tyler Rowland. Titans fans, DeAndre Hopkins' contract is a masterpiece by Rand Carthon. Not only did they get Hopkins for a great rate, but his contract is full of potential incentives where Hopkins could earn even more money than the initial deal if he hits certain statistics on the football field. It's a great setup for the Titans. We're going to dive into what those incentives are, how Hopkins can make that extra money, and of course, why the Titans are hoping they can pay it to him. We'll also respond to some of the hate that the DeAndre Hopkins signing has gotten, and some of it is just absolutely ridiculous. Also, George Fant telling the Tennessee Titans to give him a call on Twitter. We're going to talk about that and why that move makes sense. Before we get into all of it, though, I do want to thank you guys for making the Locked On Titans podcast your first listen each and every day. Remember, Monday through Friday, daily Tennessee Titans content on all apps all year long and always for free. Make sure that you get subscribed, stay subscribed to the Locked On Titans podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day. Shout out to my everydayers out there listening to the show Monday through Friday. Couldn't do it without you. Let me know who you are down below in the comments and throw a thumbs up on the video. If you're watching right now, the show is always free. All I ask for in return is the press of a button. But with that being said, I want to talk about the DeAndre Hopkins contract in general, but mostly dive into how the incentive-based pay is going to work for Hopkins. First and foremost, as a refresher, we talked about it yesterday. My everydayers will remember our instant reaction podcast to the DeAndre Hopkins news. The contract details came out pretty quickly. It's going to be a 2-year deal worth $26 million, but there is potential for the money to go up to $32 million because Hopkins can earn an extra $3 million in each season. So that's a pretty good rate for Hopkins. There are some people out there, and we'll talk about this in just a moment, saying that the Titans overpaid. But as I mentioned yesterday, when you stack it up to where DeAndre Hopkins' average annual value of $13 million is, he's the 23rd highest paid wide receiver in the NFL. The Titans have a chance to get top 10 wide receiver play for 23rd wide receiver money. Funny, speaking of top 10 wide receivers, the Madden ratings for wide receivers came out on Monday. I'm throwing those up right now. The top 10, DeAndre Hopkins, a 93 overall. Look at number 9 there. A.J. Brown, a 91 overall. So you're telling me that the Tennessee Titans paid half the money that A.J. Brown got per year, but got a better player? I'm not so sure about that one, man. But either way, it highlights just how great of a value this contract is. But I bring up where Hopkins lands in terms of, how highly he's paid amongst wide receivers. Because even if DeAndre Hopkins hits his incentives, he is still going to be an incredible value. And if he hits the highest part of his incentives, he's going to be even more of a value than we can even imagine. So throwing those incentives up right now, basically Hopkins has a 4-step system for incentives in 3 different categories. So he gets paid $250,000 extra as the first step, $500,000 extra as the second step, $750,000 as the third step, and then he can make $1 million extra if he gets to the 4th step. So there are 4 steps: 250, 500, 750, 1 million. And again, 3 different categories: catches, yards, and touchdowns. So his production out on the field. So at the lowest step for catches, 65 catches, 250K, 75 catches, 500K, 85 catches, 750K. And then if he gets 95 catches, Hopkins will earn an extra $1 million. It's the same thing with yards. 750 at step 1, 850 at step 2, 950 at step 3. If Hopkins gets 1,050 receiving yards, he is going to get an extra $1 million. And then touchdowns, same steps, 4 touchdowns, 6 touchdowns, 8 touchdowns, 10 touchdowns. We'll get him $1 million. So if Hopkins gets 95 catches for 1,050 yards and 10 touchdowns, he is going to get that extra $3 million. And my Lord, he will be worth it. That's why I said the Titans are praying, wishing, hoping, praying that they have to pay DeAndre Hopkins that max money, that $16 million. And even if they do, $16 million a season, you know who makes more money than $16 million a season? Hunter Renfrow. Christian Kirk, who had a pretty good season last year, no doubt. Deontay Johnson. Mike Williams. I mean, if you're telling me that DeAndre Hopkins had 10 touchdowns, 10,050 yards, and 95 catches, and he got paid less than Hunter Renfrow, I mean, I may cry actual tears. But that's why it is so insane that I saw people saying that the Titans overpaid, that I saw criticism of this move, considering the Titans situation and even the max amount of production and money that the Titans could pay for Hopkins. There is no way that this is an overpay. There should be no negative pushback to this move. Even if it doesn't work out, the Titans are well positioned to be perfectly fine going forward. So that's why I want to dive into some of the pushback, some of the hate that we saw come along with the Hopkins move. Mostly optimistic, mostly positive reaction. But there was some hate out there, and I just think some of it is not even rooted in the realities that could be the issues for the Titans there. Some of the hate is just completely outlandish, doesn't make a lot of sense. So I want to just talk about some of the things that we saw over the last 24 hours in reaction to that Hopkins move. Before we get into it, though, do want to let you guys know that today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook. Take your first swing at betting MLB on FanDuel, and you're going to get 10 times your first bet amount in bonus bets up to $200. That's right. All you got to do is bet $20, and you'll land $200 in bonus bets back, win or lose. That's $200 that you can bet on everything from the money line to the over-under to who you think is going to hit the first home run. It's all on an app that's safe, it's secure, it's super easy to use, and they have a bunch of fantastic promos every single day to maximize your betting dollars. Plus, when you win, you can get paid instantly. There's no better place to bet on MLB than FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. So sign up today. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get up to $200 in bonus bets. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon. FanDuel, official partner of Major League Baseball. Titans fans, let's continue today's edition of the Locked On Titans podcast. We've been talking about DeAndre Hopkins, some of the contract details that have come out, looking at the incentive structure that he has in his deal. The Titans got to be hoping and wishing and praying that they pay Hopkins that extra money, because if he gets $3 million extra dollars per season, that means that he is an all-pro level wide receiver for the Titans. And boy, that is exactly what they need, which is why it's so surprising the amount of hate that I saw for this move that the Titans have made. I want to talk about some of the things that I saw before we get into it. Do want to thank you guys again for making the Locked On Titans podcast your first listen each and every day. Remember, Monday through Friday, daily Tennessee Titans content on all apps all year long and always for free. Get subscribed, stay subscribed to the Locked On Titans podcast, where it's your team every day. Let me know down below, are there any of you guys who think the Titans overpaid for DeAndre Hopkins? Anybody out there at all? No? No one? That's what I figured, because it is a crazy thing to say at the end of the day. But I want to talk about a little bit of hate for Hopkins from a former NFL executive. And it's Michael Lombardi. He does the GM Shuffle podcast, but he went on his podcast recently and said, quote, "By being so reticent about not bringing A.J. Brown back at 25 years old, now they have signed a 31-year-old who's kind of towards the end of his career, who doesn't have the same burst and big playability that Brown had. And it really looks like it solved the problem, but to me, it just amplifies the situation. When you don't do something and you think you have the solution, you make the problem worse." So, and not to mention, Lombardi compared the Titans to the Three Stooges in the tweet that he put out to release this awful take on the world. So you're telling me that by signing DeAndre Hopkins to a deal that makes him paid less money than Cortland Sutton, Allen Robinson, and Hunter Renfrow, that the Titans have made their wide receiver situation worse? Huh? What? Okay, maybe it's not wide receiver situation. The Titans have made their team worse? Listen, here's the reality. And I ended up tweeting this out, and I won't say the entire tweet because I won't lie to you. I used the F-bomb, all right? Because it frustrates me so much to have this conversation over and over and over again. You guys know I'm not going to be someone on here cussing all the time, but I'll read the edited version. We got to stop, or I'll give you a paraphrase version. We have to stop judging the Titans based on trading A.J. Brown. The Titans traded A.J. Brown. That was a bad decision. If they could get in a time machine and go back and not do that, I guarantee that's what they would do. But saying that the Titans made their situation worse by adding DeAndre Hopkins solely because they didn't pay A.J. Brown makes zero sense. This is a different general manager entirely. We're going to be into the second season the Titans have played without having A.J. Brown on the team when this year starts. You cannot look and say, hey, we shouldn't add DeAndre Hopkins because we should have kept A.J. Brown. There are other moves that maybe you look at that and say that, like some of the trades that some people were thinking about last year. But this is an entirely new team with a brand new financial situation because of the moves that they made this offseason. The Titans are going to have $80 to $100 million in cap space over the next 2 years. They are in a perfect position to take this kind of risk. And the risk is minimal anyway, because like I said, Hopkins is getting paid less than guys like Hunter Renfrow and Allen Robinson. How is this any kind of risk? How is this making the problem worse in any way? It doesn't make any sense. It makes zero sense. And the co-host of the show, and I'm blanking on the name because it wasn't on the screen it's not a podcast I listen to all the time, but even said, like, A.J. Brown got twice as much money. He got $100 million. How is that comparable to giving $30 million to Hopkins? And Lombardi had some terrible answer about cash flow and all this, but at the end of the day, it doesn't make any sense. This was the perfect move for the Titans to make, and with minimal future financial risk. So I don't see how you can look at what the Titans did here with Hopkins and say that it made the situation worse for the Titans from any perspective or any vantage point. Not only that, but I want to dive into another reaction here. It comes from Warren Sharp. And Warren Sharp is a good football analyst. He has a lot of very intelligent commentary, but sometimes when he talks about the Titans, he just misses the mark, in my opinion. I agree with the beginning of what he's saying here. He gets off to a great start, and he basically is agreeing with what I was just saying. Don't understand the Titans should have just signed A.J. Brown talk. Hopkins' deal is for $26 million for 2 years. Brown is $400 million and 4 times that. Hopkins is only making wide receiver 23 money. Warren Sharp is all on top of it right there. That's basically what I just said. But then he says this: no doubt Brown is much better, but Tennessee was dumb to pay Henry and Tannehill, so they couldn't pay Brown. Not hard. Well, apparently it is hard to understand, Warren, because that is incredibly wrong. People saying to me, the Titans couldn't pay Henry and Tannehill and pay A.J. Brown. That is wrong. The owner has said that is wrong. She was willing to pay the money for A.J. Brown. And then people will say, well, they couldn't have paid Jeffrey Simmons. That is wrong again. The Titans missed on their first-round picks in 2020 and 2021. Missed on their second-round pick in 2021, most likely. Are not going to pay Christian Fulton their second-round pick in 2020. They didn't pay Rashaan Evans as their first-round pick in 2018. The Titans haven't shelled out the big guaranteed dollars to players like teams that are good normally have. The Titans could have paid Ryan Tannehill, Derrick Henry, A.J. Brown, and Jeffrey Simmons and Harold Landry all at the same time. If there was any financial mistake the Titans made recently, it was paying Bud Dupree. So I'm just tired of all these bad arguments that the Titans didn't have the money to do this, so it led to this. You know why A.J. Brown isn't a Titan? Because John Robinson messed up. John Robinson, personally, Mike Vrabel said, as long as I'm the coach, we won't trade him. Mike Vrabel was pissed in the draft room after the Titans traded him. How can it not be clear and obvious to everyone that that was John Robinson making a mistake? One guy making a huge mistake. They had the money to pay him, and Robinson, for whatever reason, just didn't think that A.J. Brown was worth that money. A.J. Brown and other sources have come out and said the Titans were offering $20 million. $22 million is what A.J. Brown said he asked for. Even if he's lying and he asked for 24, the Titans should have paid it. The Eagles paid $25 million for A.J. Brown. They should have. The Titans could have paid that money and I would have been happy. So all of this is to say, using the A.J. Brown situation and one man's fatal mistake to criticize these moves that the Titans are making now, which is an absolute bargain signing for DeAndre Hopkins, it makes zero sense. Some of the commentary makes zero sense. Not only that, I saw somebody tweet out DeAndre Hopkins really picked Ryan Tannehill over Mac Jones. Well, duh. You know, what are we talking about here? And of course, now everybody wants to say that DeAndre Hopkins is washed, but if he would have signed with Kansas City or Buffalo, we know what the reaction would have been there. So it's just bad faith arguments from a lot of people. Mike Lombardi himself has ties to the Patriots organization, so maybe some home cooking there. Some of these, I guess this is why shows like the Locked On Network, like Locked On Titans, why localized entertainment and content is doing so well, because these national takes from these national sources can just be so off the mark. It's, we shouldn't care, but at the end of the day, it's just incredibly frustrating to see the Titans situation so misrepresented on a national stage. But guess that's why I'm here, to clear the air. But we got to talk about George Fant and what he said on Twitter, because he's waiting for the Titans to call. And as I've been saying for a few weeks now, the Titans should call. So we're going to talk about that in just a moment. Titans fans, let's cap off today's edition of the Locked On Titans podcast. talking about DeAndre Hopkins' contract, the incentives involved, what he has to do to hit those. Went over the statistics earlier and why that would be the best case scenario for the Titans. Quite honestly, if they had to pay Hopkins that extra money, that would just be perfect. Also talked about some of the pushback that this DeAndre Hopkins signing has gotten from some people in the national media, some just confused narratives as well. But now I want to talk about George Fant, because now that the Titans wide receiver situation has a little bit of resolution to it, it's not a 5-alarm fire. I think all of us feel pretty comfortable with the wide receiver situation going into next year now, right? Seems fair to say. Let me know down below in the comments if you disagree with me there and you're not comfortable with the wide receiver situation. I certainly am. Now the biggest issue for the Titans turns to the offensive line. And the suspension of Nicholas Petit-Ferrer makes it even more of a concern than it already was. There was a lot of uncertainty with the offensive line, whether you want to admit it or not. Andre Dillard, Brunskill, NPF going in the second year, Aaron Brewer at center, tons of question marks there, not a lot of answers. If the only real answer you have is that your rookie should be reliable, that's a lot of uncertainty. I know some people don't want to admit that with the O-line, but that's how I see it. So now that NPF is suspended, there's even more uncertainty. And when I did the positional preview series and we talked about offensive tackles a couple weeks ago, I just talked about how the Titans do not have any sort of depth at the position. And they're one bad thing away, whether it be an injury or something else, from having a real issue on their hands. And look what happened. Something happened. It wasn't an injury, but something happened. And now that depth is non-existent. Okay, there is nobody else. And shout out to my coworker at Sports Illustrated, Greg Arias. The other day, he wrote an article saying that the Titans shouldn't have to shuffle 3 players on their offensive line to fix one spot. And I agree. And the best way to avoid that is to get free agent help. And I think George Fant makes the most sense. And as a matter of fact, George Fant is ready for the call. Shout out to Brandon Kinsey, Beakins on Twitter, but he said to George Fant, tagged him in a tweet and said, Tennessee's calling your name. George Fant replied, all they gotta do is call. Then call, Ran. Pick up the phone and call, because Fant has starting experience. He played at a pretty high level a couple of years ago with the Jets. He's played right tackle. He's played left tackle. And look, the other options are destroy any semblance of the offensive line that you wanted and move Skoronski to right tackle, where he didn't play in college on the right-hand side. You could do that, and then you rely on Jamarco Jones and put him in at left guard. Or you rely on Jalen Duncan as a developmental rookie. You rely on an undrafted free agent. You try to put Jamarco Jones at right tackle, do something like that. And I don't think that those are any answers. I would take George Fant over Jamarco Jones or George Fant over Jalen Duncan. And that's the way I see the conversation. Would I rather have George Fant in the starting lineup or Jamarco Jones or Jalen Duncan or John Ajuko? Or you see what I'm saying? At the end of the day, the answer for me is going to be George Fant. He's available, and clearly being a free agent this late into the process, it's not like he has a ton of options. You could get him on a veteran contract, minimum. And if he doesn't play great and you think NPF is better, when NPF is off suspension, you add him in and George Fant becomes a really solid swing tackle. You have flexibility if Dillard gets hurt, if there's any more injuries. It's just more depth on your offensive line with a better player than you currently have. There is no downside other than the money spent. But again, you're looking at a veteran minimum contract. So the Titans may need to do one restructure to have room to have Fant and then still have flexibility during the season. But at this point, I think that would be perfectly fine with, again, the financial flexibility that they have going forward throughout the next few years. That's something that you could swallow. It wouldn't be a huge detriment to you. So Fant is ready for the call. The Titans need to make it. But I got to tell you guys, the fact that the Titans haven't made that call yet kind of worries me that they're not interested. So we'll see how the offensive line plays out. But that is going to do it for me today, folks. As always, I am your host, Tyler Rowland, and this was Locked On Titans.